This podcast and every other podcast on my channel is brought to you by my subscribers on Patreon. These wonderful people are the reason that I'm able to make so many shows that feature all different kinds of people who work in the games industry, from writers to developers to creative directors, as well as a new show that'll be launching in a couple of weeks featuring voice actors. Outside of just the important support that helps me make this content, Patreon supporters also get things early, unedited, and completely ad-free. They also get to ask questions for podcasts and have input on merch and in-person events as well. So if you would like to support Video Game Writing 101 or any of my other shows, please consider subscribing on Patreon. It will help me make better, cooler stuff with more people. Hello everyone, I'm Alanah, and welcome to another episode of Video Game Writing 101. I have two very exciting guests joining me today. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Lucas, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my name is Lucas Laredo, and I was one of the narrative designers for Weird West. I was in charge of the main storyline.
Raph, how about you?
Well, I'm Rafael Colantonio. I'm the founder of Arkane Studios back in the day. So that was in 99. And since then, I left in 2017. And eventually, about 2 years later, we made the company called KOFI Studios. And I'm the creative director for Weird West.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the game did just come out. To catch people up, what exactly is it?
Well, so, I had to, I changed my mind now that I've seen so many tweets and so many people talking about it, because initially I was presenting it as an action RPG immersive sim. And I think the gamers define it a little better than that. They say it's a C RPG that plays like an A RPG. And
that's very specific.
So many acronyms.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. It's kind of easier to listen to what gamers think of the game, because it's always hard to. Our games are always extremely hard to market because they have this hybrid quality, which is kind of a mindfuck for marketers usually. I do think there's immersive sims qualities, which also is like a mouthful and doesn't mean much to most people. I think somewhere there.
Lucas, how would you describe it?
I'm not up on all the acronyms as well as Twitter is. I would say that Raf's description is totally right. I mean, for the folks who hear immersive sim and that means something, that's really what our game does. And I would say, action RPG, for me, it's all about the fact that it's set in the Wild West, and we got pigmen, and we got werewolves. We got things that go bump in the night. We got scary stuff. We got beautiful stuff. We got funny stuff. And I think we worked hard to make sure there was a good story in there as much as we could do it.
I think you did a pretty good job of that. The thing that stands out to me, like if I'm to remove the acronyms for people watching, maybe I'll put some footage over this, is that it is like a dark fantasy take on the West, which is very, very interesting. So how did that come about as a setting?
I think a few of us wanted to do the West. Specifically, we have a lead animator, Etienne Aubert, who's a big fan of Westerns. And I like them too, but personally, I like when there's a little more fantasy to it. And so that's how it organically became a reimagining, like a dark fantasy version of the West. I think fantasy is great for many reasons. You can come up with interesting stories, but also they provide a lot of gameplay elements and powers and stuff that is just fun for games.
It makes it sound so simple. I imagine it was a little bit harder than that.
It was torturous, wasn't it? Was it total torture?
Well, it was very iterative for sure.
Yeah.
At first, I remember we were like, okay, this is going to be 95% Western and 5% weird, 5% fantasy. And then it was not enough fantasy, so you kind of like move the slider until it feels right. I think now I would say we're like 70-30 or something like that.
That feels about right.
That. Yeah. Me too.
And some of the journeys are way more, the slider is a little bit further. I mean, when you're playing the Pigman journey, that thing's just 100% weird the whole time.
I love it. I'm a big fan of the weird. But when you're going, to make the debut game from this new studio that you've made that people are very excited about because you have a lot of talent from Arkane, where do you start? Like, what's the approach for if this is the thing that defines the start of this new studio? Like, how do you? That just seems like a lot of pressure. Is sort of my question. How did you decide on Weird West?
I think it was very easy because my co-founder Julien Roby was with me at Arkane since 2000, frankly. So he's seen all the games. He's been part of them.
And you're still not sick of each other? That's
And,
amazing.
not yet.
They love each other. You guys love each other.
And
we love Julien.
We both have like an implicit understanding for the kind of games we like. And frankly, if you think of Arx Fatalis, the first game we made, or the last game I made, which was Prey. He was not with me at that time. He had left Arkane already, but he had been with me for easily 15 years, and so I did Prey without him, but it's all those games, they really share the same DNA, the same that mix of simulation and storytelling, which is so hard because the systems rarely the game shines at the intersection between the authored storytelling and the systems and the story that the player tell themselves. And those are always very, very hard to make, and they cause a lot of bugs, and they require the players to somehow co-create their own adventure.
How do you feel about that, Lucas, in terms of like narrative design? Would you agree with that being a complicated component?
Oh, it's so hard. I mean, I sort of don't really have anything. I don't have much to compare it to because I had worked on a couple of smaller projects before coming on at KOFI, but nothing like this. And to say, okay, this is the first time you're going to be in charge of the main storyline of a game. By the way, every character can be killed any time you want, and the story has to keep going, and it has to be interesting. That's hard. It's really hard.
Well, that's the thing I'd love to dig into. And it's one of my favorite questions to ask people who come on the show is like, what is one of the most unexpectedly difficult things about your job? So like a lot of developers listen to this show, but there are also people who know nothing, who don't even know what narrative design means as a job, right? Like how do you approach something like that, like an evolving narrative where the player is so much a part of the story process? Like literally, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Good programmers?
Well, I mean, I'm really lucky that I came into a studio where, as Raph was mentioning, the people who are working on this game have, 20 years of experience working on immersive sims already and have seen a lot of these things before. I was coming in very fresh. I was coming more from the fiction writing world. And so I had a lot to learn. But they had the guardrails up for me the whole time. And I made tons of mistakes, but they would sort of guide me back. And I think that what is hardest, this might be more for the developers listening, but maybe for the players too. I think the hardest thing is to figure out literally what game object do you put the story in. Is the story inside of an NPC that you talk to is for a particular story moment? Like say we're trying to find the gold temple of whoever, and there are little nuggets along the way that lead you there. Is it going to be an object in the game world that's a clue that leads you there? Well, in our game, that's great because you can't shoot an object dead. So you don't have to worry about it getting destroyed from the game world. But if it's inside of an NPC who you're going to talk to and have a relationship with, and they have really important information for you, in a game like ours, that's immediately a problem because the player can choose. In an immersive sim, when we tell you, here's a gun, you can shoot it, we don't say, but don't shoot these people, though. Mm-hmm. You can shoot we give you the verb, we give you the gun, you just do it wherever you want. So trying to figure out where safe places are to put story in the game is really hard. And then deciding when you want to put the story in unsafe places.
Yeah, because it'd be easy to talk yourself out of it, right? It'd be easy to go, well, but that can die, so let's just not do that. But then you have no NPCs because you're too scared. You can't do that either.
It's a game of notes and diaries, which you don't want.
Yeah.
I think what you do is you make sure that your world and the elements of your story are cohesive in a way that is mechanically correct. So, for example, if the door that leads to the end of the game or that leads to the end of that quest has a key, and that key has to be on a character, that character could be a good character, and that character, that's all matters. If you play the normal way, the character will ask you to do something, something that might be even annoying, like go and find this thing for me or whatever. I've lost a book or something, and but as long as this character has the key, you can kill a character, avoid the book thing because it's and then like the key will still work. So as long as all the mechanics that leads to the end of the game are in the world in cohesive ways, there's no blocking cinematic. You're not allowed to. If it's a blocking cinematic, it's not a blocking cinematic to fool the player into like those moments where you have the bad guy coming up and the bad guy talks and then he leaves the room and you were like, oh, come on.
Yeah, it's not satisfying.
It's not allowed. We don't do anything like that. So if there's a moment that someone shows up, we're not gonna do this kind of trick with you. So we always gonna try to be very real about the elements and how they connect to each other, and then we encourage you to do the good thing because it creates an interesting emotion. If you were to kill that character to take the key, it would work. Most players, when they start understanding our game, that's what they do. They save, they kill a character. Character might die, and maybe it was a good character. Maybe it was someone that talked to you before, and you kind of had some empathy with this character, and you take the key, and now that's it. You could just proceed. Most people feel bad, and they would reload and do the quest instead. And I think that is something that we had all the way back to Ars Fatalis, and I think it's a missed opportunity in many games for me. That creation of that triggering of emotions that like guilt or like empathy is so powerful. Even if most players will play the good way, most players will do the quest because they don't want to break the game, because they want to be bad people. But the fact that they know that they could just kill that person gives meaning to the fact that they play like a good person.
That's true. The fact that it's an option gives them more agency, which means they're probably more invested in the story. It's a very good point. The fact you're even giving them the freedom means they're more invested.
Can I just add to that? That is one of my favorite things that Raph has said over the course of this development cycle that really stuck with me, which is like when you give the player the agency to, in our case, in our game, killing is a main verb, and that's sort of, we're in the West, that's what we deal with. Killing is a big part of what happens in our game. There are guns and stuff. If you say you can do this whenever you want, you can kill your friends whenever you want, you can do all these things. In most games, there's never a threat that you can kill someone you care about because the systems protect them, or you shoot them and nothing happens and the game doesn't respond. The fact that in our game you can do that means that not only are you choosing to kill characters when you want to, when you choose to abstain from killing a character, that's also a choice. And so there's like this feeling to me of tension in every moment in our game, because there's something you could do that would be really terrible, but you're abstaining from doing it. And that's a choice that most players don't get to make in a lot of games, I think.
It's a very powerful thing about video game storytelling. And this is also a question that I like asking people is like, what do you think is the biggest strength of video game storytelling versus other mediums? And my answer is always empathy. Is that you can do some very cool stuff with empathy in games. You can even take somebody who's engaging in really poor behavior, put them in the shoes of somebody who's engaging in poor behavior in a game, and have them realize what their actions are doing to people. Like, it's a very powerful tool, and I feel like sometimes we don't take advantage of it enough.
That's a good point. The empathy part. I think also the player story, if you give the player enough tools, enough type of verbs, and a lot of simulation, and a game that has enough breadth, then suddenly there is a story of the game, but there's also like the story that the player starts to develop inside that story, and that can be, okay, now I got to go back to the village and get a horse because I have enough of doing this kind of thing, etc. Like, I'm too slow, whatever. So the player will go back to the village, and it doesn't have enough money, or she doesn't have enough money, and now like there's another entire new quest that the player is gonna, and getting that money might be robbing people because it's really hard to find money in our game. It's at the beginning anyway. And so at some point, it's tempting to just go to the doctor's office and start to as the doctor is asleep, I might just as well, I know it's bad, but I'm just going to steal some stuff because the game doesn't really punish me for that. And now I can finally buy the thing I wanted. And that's an entire story which
they've created that you haven't made them.
They had a whole emotional experience, and we didn't really write any of that. It's just the systems.
Check this one. I've seen that tweet that I thought was amazing. When was it exactly? So the player buried their son, and then dig him out, got the bone and the skull, because in our game there's there's a bit of an abstraction where once you bury someone and you dig them out, then there's going to be they've rotten already. So he got the skull, and he went to the store to sell the skull of his son, right?
Whoa.
So it's dark, right? It's weird.
That is not in a quest line that we wrote, that's for sure.
Any of that, we don't encourage that, but that player had that story, that player just did that and went 10 out of 10, perfect, because those are kind of things that I like systems to really go to the elemental level. The more we offer systems that might be cumbersome at first, like you can take an object, you can move the object, you can throw the object, you can drop the object, you can put it in an inventory, you can put from an inventory to another inventory. That feels like Windows 12 management kind of system, right? It doesn't feel like a fun game. And then on top of that, we can add some shortcuts to make the life easier. But I think starting with this very elemental verbs, create gameplay, create story, because this is a story podcast, so not going to focus on gameplay specifically, but it does create stories.
Yeah,
like the stories of the person that sold their son's skull. That is because of all those systems that are there. There's no other way to do that. Right, so that's why I'm talking about the authored story with all the branches and all of that people recognize and they think is great. But then there's the entire system story, the player story, which to me is way more interesting, frankly.
I think it's also the thing that stays with people for the longest. The stories that you create yourself.
Yeah, and the more unique, the more belong.
Very hard to do though, and a lot of games don't pull it off.
Right, so it's a mix of the lore that is there, the authored story, the personal goals that the players might have, and all those systems everywhere that we create moments of storytelling.
Lucas, you mentioned coming from other kinds of fiction. What was that shift like? Like having to deal with player agency and storytelling, was that a difficult hurdle to overcome?
Yeah, it certainly was. I think that for any writers out there who come from a prose background, poetry background, screenwriting background, I think there's a temptation to say, well, hey, a lot of the games that I play have tons of great cutscenes. Those play just like movies. They seem like they're screenplays, so I could probably do that too. I was getting my MFA here at UT Austin in fiction, but I started taking video game writing courses from a woman named Susan O'Connor, who's one of the writers for BioShock, and she's really amazing at what she does. And when I started learning about what it takes to write games and the sort of different considerations that game writers have that fiction and screenwriters don't, it becomes clear very quickly that it is totally a different medium. Yes, the prose has to be good. Yes, the dialogue has to be good. But you're imbuing story in every element of the game possible, and it's so much more of a co-creation with the team. It's working with the artists and the level designers. You're talking about story. How can we make this space communicate story to the player? And oftentimes, when I talk to friends about this, I think the closest analog to game writing is designing and writing immersive theater. So if you think about like Sleep No More in New York, yeah, totally. You know exactly what I was going to say. So Sleep No More is totally a video game that they designed, right? Because I haven't been there but from what I've heard, you enter the space, you put on a mask even, right? So you're putting on the character, right? They tell you, I imagine, What verbs are available to you? What are you allowed to do in this space? Are there any things you can't do? Don't touch the performers. Don't do this. Don't do that. You can do this. You can't do that. So you're given the rules of the game. And then you go into the space and there's a story happening all around you, but it's not linear. There are branches everywhere. The performers are also improvising based on the input that the participants are giving, right? And then there are these little authored moments sprinkled throughout where you get these, one-on-ones with actors. So it's been fun thinking of it in that context, and I think definitely the biggest learning for me has been to try to let go of leading the player by the nose quite so much.
Yeah.
Raph knows that I have this problem, or at least hopefully it's something I've learned from after doing Weird West, but I just want to lead the player by the nose. I want there to be some great dialogue, some great scenes. Let me take you through a great story. But it's really not the way to do narrative design for a game, and especially not for an immersive sim.
Yeah, especially not for immersive sim. But I think you nailed it with the theater example. And I think I was going to say even like it's more of a dungeon master kind of exercise, right? Like if you, at least in our type of games, right? You work on a space, and then on a space of possibilities, and you have to think of all the things that you can control. And then the fallbacks for the thing you don't control. Of course, when you play a pen and paper RPG, you have more chance to improvise, which you can't in a video game. But that's why the systems are here, and you hope that they somehow fall back on their feet when things go wrong. So that, for example, if you attack an entire city, then you still have to think of, okay, now what do we do? Like in the case of the player being enemies of all the people, including the quest givers, that's why you want to make sure that the key is on the people.
Yeah.
So it doesn't rely on them talking to you, right? But we back in the day when we hired Lucas, we chose Lucas because he's super smart, and anyway, I was interviewing him for that role, and I knew that he would be able to have one of the skills to me that is extremely important for a game writer or a narrative designer is a transversal understanding of the entire world and making those connections, because it's a job that is, you're kind of the keeper of the lore and the story of this game, and it's extremely iterative. It changes every minute. As we see players playing, we think of a different thing. As we want to insert a new story or something doesn't work, we get to break things. And as you move something here, there's going to be 65 different consequences over there, and there. And it takes that kind of brain, that kind of like global understanding of every consequence to what you do as from a game standpoint, not from a game standpoint, to be able to maintain that thing. So it's a very exhausting mental exercise where even if I'm part of modifying the main plot or something, it's easy for me to come in and say like, I don't like that plot twist. It's kind of like, how about we do this instead? About like, I got this new idea, and some of them were actually better than what we had. So and he was like, great, but I don't have to worry about what it means. He does.
Yeah.
And he goes like, hold on. He comes me back. That doesn't work. So it's supposed to. Oh shit, you're right. Yeah.
I think people can underestimate how iterative video game writing actually is. I think some of the outside perception from players is that it just is what it was on day one, and they don't have a vision of the cuts and the things that got lost and the pieces you had to pick up elsewhere because things got lost. It's definitely never stops.
Never
more
stops.
In video games than anything, because we are still modifying until the last minute, which you can't in a movie.
I wish it were that simple.
And that's what makes it so different. Go ahead, Raph.
I don't participate to that anymore since a long time, but the player-facing part, because it's one thing to have the story, and I would say that's what maps to in the movies industry, that would be the dialogue or whatever, the script, right? But so the player facing is also super hard. You have all the things that you want the player to understand. You and then you have like a different set of tools. You have the of course the other characters speaking to the player, but you also have visual storytelling. Like, let's make sure that
Mm-hmm.
in order to convey the idea that in our world we have, whatever, this type of transmission device for communication, for example, let's make sure that some people mention it, or that there are towers to explain that, and that is going to catch the attention of the player, and it makes sense in our world, and everything is cohesive.
What team does that come from? Like when you're doing stuff like environmental storytelling, does that tend to come from a writer or from a narrative designer, or does that also come from art?
It's everybody, I think.
Yeah.
Everybody all at once.
Everybody feeds everybody, in a way. Sometimes the artists will hear that we have this thing, and they will think, oh, that would be great to have like this nice tower and they go, oh, great, absolutely. And then once the tower is in, then we think we need to give it a name or like to explain how and why, and therefore there's a book that talks about it somewhere. Yeah. So it's really like a ping pong between everybody.
I think that's actually my favorite thing about working in game dev in general, is that it is so collaborative, and it's, potentially hundreds of people all working towards a common goal for several years. After I started out in journalism, and that's so like you write the thing and it's done and you do it in a vacuum, and then it just disappears 2 hours after you publish it and it's gone. Like working with a team on something of people who constantly inspire you is just the coolest thing in the world, but it can also be really challenging. If your communication's not good, that's how your studio falls apart. Like it can definitely be very tough to have to
both
work
those
with
things at
people.
once.
For sure.
Yeah, I feel like putting story into the game, or communicating what certain things do. What is the story happening in this environment? You said, like, where does it come from? I feel like oftentimes there's a spark of an idea. Maybe in Raf's example, we have something in our game called the relayograph. That's a way that people can communicate with each other. It starts, say, for instance, that it started with a writer saying, or a narrative designer saying, we need a system where we can communicate with the player across long distances, because that's just going to make our lives easier design-wise. Then you're like, okay, cool. And then from there, it's like the existence of that object in the world of the game, the story of it, builds out across sort of all of the disciplines across the studio, and so it sort of like fills up this story tub with water. It's a terrible analogy, but the idea being that it's sort of it's more of like a building than it is like one person had an idea and it struck lightning and then it was done. No, it's sort of like, we're all building a house together. Someone had an idea for, wouldn't it be cool if there was a house there? It's like, okay, great, we need everyone's help in order to...
What are the rooms going to be? What do they look like?
Yeah, what are the rooms going to be? What is the foundation like?
Yeah.
Hey, programmers, like, can you make sure this thing has a solid foundation and it isn't going like this everywhere? And how are we going to decorate? What sort of shrubbery do we want on the walkway? Because that's important too. It's like sort of all of it together. And it seems like no one person is responsible. It's sort of all of us at once.
Strongly agree. Yeah. It's absolutely everybody. And shout out to QA.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Shout out to all the departments that don't get any love.
QA on an immersive sim, especially. I mean, that's like one of the things.
How does that even work? How do you QA a game that's so customizable?
Yeah, you can only to some level. I mean, in our case, we had to eventually the big win was to do some sort of a closed beta with 1,000 players, because I mean we have amazing QA and they're very seasoned in this
they can never play as much as players can. It's just not possible.
No. I mean, after 10 playthroughs, you're gonna somehow do the same things that you've done. You're not gonna think of those crazy things. So like, even though I mean, it's, because of their job, they're probably better than any of us, but it's still, you can't cover everything. So in our case, the final win was to do that, and we still have tons of bugs. So that we're fixing now, by the way. It's still a difference between 1,000 players and then when it goes to hundreds of thousands of players. So that's we're on Game Pass, so we have like 300,000 players.
Do we really? Wow, good for us. It's great. Well, and one thing that I would say about that too is, in some ways, it is a part of the narrative design process. Because of the nature of our game, which again is immersive sim, there are just an infinite number of possible combinations of the way that the state of the game. Which characters did you kill? Which ones did you not kill? Who did you turn in? Who didn't you turn in? Which quest object did you skip? I mean, we let you visit any location you want before you're supposed to. Did the player do something there? They went to the final boss first. How does that affect the story?
You can do that?
Yep.
Give
No
it a
way.
shot.
Huh.
Oh man,
I can't wait to see speedruns of this game.
Yeah.
The speed run on this game is going to be like 5 minutes. It's going to be amazing.
Wow.
It's going to be really good. Yeah. But so like I feel like the narrative design process for this, it's so iterative as it is for all games, but it's also like, we consider one or two versions of the main story. Say the bounty hunter journey. It's like we imagine the player making one of these two choices in these big pivotal choice moments. But then there are all these little choices that are happening all over the place that we're trying to support too. And, as Raph was saying, sort of trying to hold all of the possibilities in your brain at once becomes kind of an impossible exercise. So a lot of it comes from like, you do a playtest, something happens you didn't expect. You did a combination of things that was strange, and suddenly you arrive at a moment where you think, all this crazy stuff happened, and if the game responded to me in this moment right now in this way, what I just did would feel validated by the designers, and like I was making a concerted choice to do these things, and now the game is responding, validating my choices, and I feel like I have co-authored my playthrough because there's this response from the game. So we would try to find all these, and Julien was especially good at this, our producer, where he would say, okay, well, if you do this with Shelby Cross and this thing and this other thing, what if we put a little bit of story material out here on this like branch of a branch?
Yeah.
And then when the player experiences that, they think, holy shit, if they accounted for those like 3 exponential branches and there was something for me there, what else is here? And so suddenly in their mind, it's like the game becomes even more expansive than we have the manpower to make.
Yeah, I mean, it's the game that validates you somehow, right?
Yeah, it sees me. Yeah.
Raph, over your time working on these kinds of games, I imagine you've worked with a lot of different writers. What do you think is the most important quality in when you're hiring a video game writer to work on an immersive sim? Like, what are you looking for in that hiring process?
So yeah,
outside of being smart like Lucas, we can't all be like Lucas.
I talked about that, and so like so that would be like this kind of horizontal, like this broad kind of thinking about like the consequences and of everything you can do in the world. Like when you that is, of course, is extremely important, I think, for any writer.
Yeah.
But in the context of our type of games, I think with some of the hotball we throw at them are things around how do you make a story without any cinematic? How do you allow the players to break your story? Because those are very uncomfortable for many writers. A lot of writers would imagine that they're going to write the story, and then somehow the game is going to shoehorse itself into that story. And because tons of games do that, which is not at all what we want.
Yeah.
So it does take like a bit of a dungeon master kind of mind, I think, which is more like a space of possibility rather than.
I guess you could try to hire a writer who submits a brilliant story, but that wouldn't necessarily be valuable to the kind of games that you make.
Totally. And most of it, the plot twist is interesting, but it's not really something that has tons and tons of value to us we can. I can write plot twists. I mean, like in the ones.
He's good at them too, I will say.
The ones from
you played Prey before? Come on.
Yeah.
So
that's in the first 10 minutes.
So those are not necessarily the things that I'm looking into for a narrative designer or for a writer. I'm really looking for people who know how to create an atmosphere with independent elements, people that understand narrative, visual storytelling, and possibilities, because that's really that thing. It's like you place your elements. There's like this old shoe in the corner, like a burnt mattress and a broken chair, and you just told a story. That is, to me, extremely interesting, more than someone who can write a story. Write a story is not, and also someone who can do player facing with because again, like, how do you do player facing with very cheap tricks? Some of it is that the narrative, the visual, but also having simple and punchy dialogue that are not interruptive or that are not too heavy to read. So those are qualities that you can't really guess in advance. I mean, of course, someone might have a resume, but even then, in a team, there's so many people, so it's hard to know who does what. I try also to look at the past games that the people have written. Of course, I value people who understand dilemmas, moral dilemmas, ambiguity. I love twisted characters that have multiple dimensions. So, to name a few, I was a huge fan of Fallout. I was the original Fallout 1 and 2, and even later. I was
I mean, that's all moral dilemmas.
Yeah, because it's so cool. It's so cool to
Wasteland is still like one of my favorite series ever.
Yeah, so all that family, like the Obsidian, Black Isle initially, and then they became the people who did Arcanum, and so like they did the Vampire Bloodlines, and as well then they became so the company you're talking about, the Wasteland, it's Brian Fargo's company. I can't remember the name.
I can picture the logo. Let me look it up. I don't want to not mention it.
But this guy is like all of them, they really have this culture, and it's really something that is interesting to us as reference for some of the things we're trying to do.
I will say, Raph took a huge chance on me. You talked about looking at previous games. I didn't have shit for you to look at. You really took a chance, and
I think
I remember
there's value in that though too, because like there are writers on my team who don't have previous games experience, and I'm of the impression that there's value in that, because some people can be limited by thinking of other games too much. Like, I think that there's like a kind of diversity on a writer's team is the kind of stuff they consume and the kind of things they've written before can all funnel into this one thing where you get a whole bunch of really, really different ideas.
It definitely...
For me, it was in the case of Lucas. I think now, I might give too much information, but about him, now he's going to be like, "Oh, that's how you." Okay, but,
yeah, I'm interested to hear this. Yeah, go for it.
I want someone that is super smart, that I can train in our style, because you're right. Like, you get someone that comes like has too much of a big resume, and they're going to come with so much baggage that is the wrong one, because they have all these habits about like, oh yeah. Now, and you need someone that was flexible.
We'll do a cinematic here and a cinematic there. Yeah.
But at the same time, that would be not a pushover. Someone that I feel like, okay, so he's still gonna tell me, well, Raph, I hear you, but this thing doesn't. What about this? Because like and sometimes it's hard, because younger designers, if they work with me, they feel like, okay, I got to say yes, But I don't necessarily want that. I don't want the opposite either. I didn't want someone who would be like hard-headed and say no to everything, because that's not really a way to to make progress. But so it's the right balance. Someone that is going to voice what they think is important to voice, but that really matters. And at the same time, after 2 or 3 explanation, they will say, okay, that sounds, unless they convince me, which happens, of course. Is that something you feel, Lucas? Now we're having
No, I love this.
You're having like a post-mortem of your hiring process.
Pause the podcast and like we're just gonna have a heart-to-heart right now. It was funny because I just remember Raph asking me during my interview, he's like, "What are your favorite games?" And I was just like, "I was a huge Nintendo fan growing up. I love Zelda and Mario." And he was just like, "Okay, we're making Weird West. We're making Weird West, right? It's an immersive sim." And I was like, "What's that?" I had never heard the term immersive sim before, and I hadn't played Dishonored and Prey.
At least you didn't lie.
I don't think I did.
That would be worse.
Right? No, I didn't. I think I had watched like an hour of someone playing Dishonored because I knew I was about to get interviewed.
Yeah, usually I ask people, have you played Thief? Have you played Dishonored? Have you played Prey? Have you played Fallout? Have you played Deus Ex?
Yeah. And I was like, nope, and nope, and nope, and nope, and nope.
Again, I still think
like,
there's
you mean
value
Ocarina
in
of Time? Okay. But it's
You mean Majora's Mask. I'm not sure what this thief you speak of is.
Exactly. No, but I think like I I was so grateful to get the job, and it really was such a huge learning experience for me. And Raf and the rest of the team were super patient with all of the sort of, beginner's errors that I was making, because I couldn't see yet what works and what doesn't without trying it and learning through bitter experience. Hey, doing the narrative design this way for this story moment, it's not going to work. It's going to create tons of labor for everyone, and let's just not do that. Now, after going through 2 years of working on Weird West, I'm starting to be able to see those things easier.
To be fair, we're not very patient, but so it's just that we have
patient to an extent.
A very sink or swim mentality, and you managed to learn very quickly.
I at least didn't drown.
I just feel like it's valuable for people to know that that's a way into video game writing. It's like you don't have to have already written video games, because that's the thing a lot of people ask. Because I had done a little bit of contract/freelance writing, and I had done game jams, but I had obviously not worked on a AAA game before going to work at Santa Monica Studio. And I think a lot of people are like, well, how do I start? I'm this kind of writer. I'm like, you can. The option is there with the enthusiasm, but also you obviously took the initiative by taking courses and everything. Before I ask another question, Wasteland originally was into play and is now in exile.
In exile.
Yes.
There we go.
And I really liked Wasteland 3 as well. I thought it was great. Big fan of Wasteland. What all good games you mentioned. Deus Ex, Thief, Fallout are all brilliant. And Dishonored and Prey, obviously. So to jump off of those kinds of games, Raph, I'd love to ask, what is your ideal for the direction of video game storytelling? Where do you want to see it head? What do you see for the future?
Ooh, juicy.
Difficult question.
So I think I do like stories that acknowledge the player's choices. That's something that is super important to me, and I think I regret in some ways that technology has been focusing so much on the visuals, which to me part that doesn't really matter. We're already pretty beautiful now. We don't need to go really more hair, more this, more that. I think it's just a waste of time, and adding more authoring, more cost to the production. What I would love to see, and I don't know if that will make sense, but it's the physics version of storytelling.
I totally agree. So strongly agree. That I feel like we're in this thing where there are a lot of great games that have great storytelling, but we're not taking advantage of the fact that this technology is effectively limitless in a way that, like you said, everything is focusing on graphics and physics are improving as well. But where's the storytelling version of that? And I don't think that, you're absolutely right, that I don't feel like it's progressing a whole lot. I think the more games I see with no cinematics, the more impressed I am by that. That's the current thing that I find the most jarring with anything that I play is if there's a game and I'm interested in the story and the characters, but I'm always barred from gameplay, even if gameplay is really cool, because I have to just sit and watch a cutscene for 5 minutes. I find that so frustrating now that I have trouble playing games like that. I could be doing it. I know you have to figure out what gameplay I'm doing at that period of time or what I'm doing, but I could be doing something else. And right. We don't want the Half-Life locked in a room jumping around while serious stories are being told, but that's where we started, and it doesn't feel like we've come as far as I would have liked since then. Yeah,
one of the issues I'm really curious about this too. I mean, you're making me think of that Ken Levine talk on Narrative Legos, which everyone talks about, which was really, really fascinating to watch.
I've seen his game.
So curious. Really?
Yeah, and I want to talk about it so bad. I hope it comes out. It's I hope he can pull it off.
Me too.
Very
I think we're all really curious to see what's happening over there, and I think I agree with Raph too. I think I have trouble envisioning exactly what those systems are, because I keep coming back to the bottleneck of the stories players create using systems can be really awesome. Like the ones that Raph mentioned about, you bury your dead son and then there's the skull and you sell it for the whatever. Or we had earlier in some of our testing, what was it? We have systems where if you kill somebody and their family member is present and they escape, they'll start a vendetta against you and come back later and attack you. And there's also a random chance that your player character's parents will spawn in the game. So there was someone testing and the mother and father had spawned in the game and they killed their father, and then the mother ran away and was like, I'll get you for this. And so then like later the mother came back to like exact revenge on the husband's death by killing the player character, which was her son. So, you know, like these super interesting things that happen. But like I also say again.
It's still mechanical, right? It's like
right. It's not an authored. It doesn't have the like emotion of an authored story, and I'm like, can we ever completely leave authored story, especially when language itself? If you're going to do it, stories that are language based, the English language is just so hard to.
I don't think you can remove the writer.
Good.
Author. You need to set up a situation that is relatable and interesting, and that is gonna be compelling for the player to want to fix the problem. What is the problem in this world? What I would wish there was, though, in addition to all the systems that we have, which are kind of like hinting towards what I would like to see, is like, okay, well, if the player wants to do it this way, let him do it this way. But I think there could be, and I don't know how that's going to happen, but I wish there was an AI. I wish there was an AI, like a global AI that is there to catch things that fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because in our game, we have tons of things that fall through the cracks. And when they fall through the cracks, you have a fallback, and the fallback can be a character going like, huh? And then you go, okay, well, it's not quite there yet, but like we allow the player to do it and it's going to work. But I wish the AI would be there to know what to do in this kind of situation. Okay, we have this system, we have that system, we have this bark. In that context, we need to do that. Or if not, at least an AI that during development would tell us, hey, I found this situation. How do we
God, that would be so amazing if it could identify.
It seems possible, just very expensive.
Well, I mean, with machine learning and all these things that are coming, it seems like, I don't know if you've seen Disco Diffusion. It's pretty freaky.
Disco Diffusion?
Oh, that's right. Oh my God, it's insanely
AI
incredible.
Images from Google. It's you think like that. There's a mind behind this. Like
it's like an AI that's creating images.
It creates images based on like text descriptions that you give it.
It's just prompts.
Whoa.
And it's freaky. It's always a little evil and dark and it's but it's like, okay,
beautiful.
If this is today, I think in 10 years we will have like some of these images could come from the mind of a twisted artist, and it's beautiful.
That's cool. What's it called? I'm gonna make sure I check that out.
Hope for AI to assist us to improve games somehow, but I don't know exactly how.
You think that's a thing that
Diffusion, I think.
Yes, I managed to get it. Yes, now with Turbo, apparently, whatever that means. It is V5 Turbo. It says. You think that's something that somebody like a Unity would have to make, or like an Epic would have to make? Or do you think that
it will come from a game that wants to solve that problem? I don't think it's going to be a generic tool that just works for everybody.
In theory, what was it called? The Nemesis System was doing a bit of that. Like that was a thing they were touching on, but just for this one particular structure in Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor. And that was the AI picking up on, okay, well, now this guy's dead, so let's rank up this guy, or like he killed you, so let's rank him up. But it obviously was very, very limited. And I was actually very surprised that that games weren't inspired by that we didn't see anybody use it afterwards.
Well, we did. A lot of the things, of course, that was the feature of their game. The game was good.
That was their marketing point.
But that part was like. It multiplied the fun of this game and the emotional engagement, like this hate that you have for that orc that comes back for the third time and kicks your ass again.
Now he's got cool armor. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Every time he gets a little stronger. A very, very smart idea. And but yes, it shows the power of semi-procedural, because of course it's semi-authored too in a way. But it's like customized per playthrough per player, based on what the player's done before, and this is extremely powerful emotionally. And I'm surprised that not everybody jumped on that train. We did with the Vendetta system and the Friend for Life.
That is true. You did with the Vendetta system. It is,
but it doesn't. We don't have the breadth to shine as much as they do, because they really invested big, and also like they have this super close up on their faces. That really works. I believe XCOM did that too.
The most recent XCOM? I haven't played it.
XCOM, there is a notion of a recurring enemy that is generated on the fly based on
Chosen, apparently. That's what the system is called. Is an XCOM Nemesis system called Chosen. That's cool. I didn't realize they did it. That makes me more interested in playing it. I always found XCOM to be just so, like, to this conversation, emotionally taxing. And I think probably part of it is that I always name everybody in XCOM after my friends. And then I text my friends when they die. And I'm like, you died! But I just get, like, messed up and very, very, very addicted to it. Yes. Exactly, which is, I guess, what they're going for. But yeah, it does feel like something that when it came out, I was like, oh, everybody's going to do this. And they didn't. And I know that part of that was they just, I think, actually patented it. I think WB passed that last year, maybe.
It's tricky because, I mean, I hated that, actually. I tweeted about it when it happened.
Oh, yeah, it sucked. Yeah.
I mean, frankly...
It sucks for everyone.
Works for everyone. You can't do that. I mean, this is game design. Like, we all copy each other to some degree. We all an iteration of a previous game.
Yeah.
And we need to stay this way, because otherwise everybody's going to start looking. I mean, what if you patent the polygon? That's it, game over.
Yeah.
So, that's just unadmissible. And I think, like, eventually it was not receivable because it is receivable in a very, very specific context. They had to frame it to a level where it's really okay. Nobody's really at risk of copying.
Doing that exact thing, yeah. Because otherwise, it is very broad. And yeah, I would hate to see the games industry go down that road in general. Because, like you said, to your point, Lucas, about playing Ocarina of Time, we're in this really interesting era where, like, every dev that I interview right now, so many directors will tell you, like, Ocarina of Time was one of their favorite games ever. And I'm very interested in what happens when we get to the next generation when nobody's played Ocarina of Time anymore. And that's like something else that inspired everybody, and like what that wave turns into. Because to Rap's point, we are all very iterative. Everything is taken from everyone else. And there are a million reasons I wish companies like Nintendo were more candid about the way that they make their games so that people just had that information more freely. But it will be interesting to see, like, the next generation of what is Fortnite, like what are the kids are all playing Fortnite
Fortnite is like the
or is it all games
experience.
as service? I don't know. I hope not. And there's also an interesting thing, and I would love to see a world where Ken Levine, what he envisioned in the Lego building talk, exists, where it seems like it's video games with less set pieces, less cutscenes, and environments that are more reactive to the player. And sure, the story still goes the same way and you still have the same characters, but they're just a little bit more adaptive. So you spend 5 hours talking to this one NPC, they might get more power, the world starts to look a little bit more the way that they would prefer it to. I think Dying Light 2 touched on that in a little bit with some of the environments. You can basically choose a faction to align with, and it'll change the way the game world looks a little bit. And I think that's a thing that I feel like we are slowly headed towards. But it's interesting because games like PUBG, it's just a multiplayer map. You spawn in every time. But the other players online are the ones that are creating the stories for you and the conflict for you every time. In a way that, like, I don't want a world where we only have multiplayer games. I'm very pro single player games, but there is also something to that where the other players are almost acting as your enemy AI and creating these really unique circumstances in something like PUBG or H1Z1 or DayZ was probably the biggest one, where you'd have people just like break your leg and then leave just because they wanted to. And that's such a unique experience that it's like, I wonder if there's just some world where we can make the AI do exactly that with the same level of unpredictability without breaking everything.
Yeah, be so. Like real spiteful assholes.
Sometimes. Or nice. You got both options.
That would be really nice too. Yeah. I sort of wonder, like, to your earlier point about I'm still thinking about cutscenes, and I'm still thinking about the way we design games, and like Raph and the people in the sort of like immersive sim canon. I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time, but I'm wondering if the like linear storytelling in games with lots of cutscenes, which we can do so well now. Oh my gosh, like we can really knock those out of the park. The design is like, it's on point. The scenes are amazingly acted.
Yeah, incredible actors.
Beautiful, right? Incredible actors. Like the set pieces are big and incredible and all these things. I'm wondering if
I don't want those games to go away. I should know.
Yeah, I don't think they do. No, I don't think
completely.
I want them to either, but I'm wondering like what it looks like when you start to mix a little immersive sim in a
Into
game like that, or if it's
I think
just
that will
like,
happen. I think that will happen.
yeah,
I think eventually the word immersive sim is going to disappear because, frankly, I believe every game should have those values. It's
yeah,
funny that they don't. And you could probably have those linear movie style games where you get a 5 minutes video and then you kill people for 30 minutes and then you have another 5 minutes of video. You could probably have some elements of immersive sim in that format, and
yeah. I
it
think
would
that
make them more
that's true.
interesting to me, at least. Like I still I'm not sure that as much as we can make cinematics that are mind-blowing visually and like probably a cool piece of storytelling at that moment, I'm still not sure that from a narrative standpoint it's a great format, like because you're gonna do like this super repetitive thing of killing 200 enemies for 20 minutes, and then you're gonna have like 5 minutes of cinematics. That's more or less what happens. How does it compare to a 2 hour movie or to a TV show that does like really really compelling characters over? So yeah, we all have examples of like Last of Us or whatever that were, this one is amazing, but that's true.
It's true. Like yeah. Again, I don't want them to go away. I work at Santa Monica Studio. God of War has plenty of cutscenes, and I think the story in that game's incredible.
Amazingly done.
I think
Yeah,
so
totally.
too. But I also very strongly feel like you're right that the future of the industry to me feels like, again, video games taking advantage of being video games and not taking advantage of a similar medium, which is film.
This is
Right,
the
right.
thing is like, you can, the thing that you can do in a game that you can't do in any other storytelling medium is the participant can co-author the story.
Yeah.
Like, they are co-authors in a video game. You can do this in a novel. You can't do that. The reader is not writing it with you. The movie watcher is not, there on set making the scenes with you. Like, in a game, that is, I feel like, the one thing that we have that other mediums
Can't
don't,
do,
which
yeah.
is, you can, because it is interactive, the player can co-author their experience. And it just is a fact that in a cinematic, the player isn't co-authoring anything. And it doesn't mean that they don't belong at all, but I think it just pays to just note that, and maybe just thinking about, like, where is the dial? Is it like, or with the slider, is it like cinematics are at 10 and interactivity is at 0, or is it 50-50, or is it more over here?
Yeah, I imagine that's like some creative directors have a very tough job of trying to balance that, of like where they exist and where they don't, and I can't imagine that's easy to figure out. Like, thankfully, I don't have to do that. I just get told, "This is here, write it." Like, I don't have to
totally.
do that
Totally.
part. That seems tough. But at this point, I'm just enthusing at you both about something I feel passionately about to try to remember to be helpful to the audience. Lucas, number one piece of advice for somebody who would like to get into narrative design in video games.
Oh, number one, I think that the number one thing is, you have to be a good writer. You have to be able to rely on good writing. And so I feel like a lot of times when I've spoken to people who are interested in getting in games and I ask what their writing practice is like, they're like, "What writing practice? I just want to write for games, and I play games and I like them and I want to write them." I feel like it doesn't really matter what the medium is. Honing your skills as a writer, which is something you can do in writing workshops. You could form a writing group, these sorts of things. Like, I think your writing skills really need to be on point, and your storytelling skills need to be on point first.
Yeah.
And then
A
there's
friend,
like
an actual good friend the other day said to me, I think I might try to get into video game writing because it seems like the easiest way to get into game development, and did not understand why that was why that was so offensive. I was like,
bless their heart.
okay, yeah, give it a shot.
It's harder because there's no manual for this either. So like, we're all sort of cobbling together our game writing education.
Yeah, everyone has a different start too, which is a thing that I do think is,
Yeah.
is very cool, and probably like makes it a simpler gateway, is that a lot of people come from a lot of different backgrounds, which is awesome. But I've also been writing books since I was 6.
There you go.
So
there you go, right?
It's a bit different.
And the cool thing is, like, with game writing, at least, like, you've honed your writing skill. Now make a Twine game. There are like tools out there where you can make a game on your own, a playable experience. You can iterate, you can have people experience the game that you've written. I often encourage people to just do a game jam, do anything to get your writing in a playable form so that you can see people play it.
I think that's good advice. Raf, how about you? What is number one piece of advice for anybody looking to get into the narrative side of the video game industry?
I mean, it's a hard one. I think it's every time it's a case by case. You know, based on who they're gonna approach. It's the connecting with that person from a I need to feel like, because it's gonna be a very intimate work. Yeah, we're gonna work very closely. There might be some emotions that come out. Sometimes we're like frustration or whatever. So we both need to feel very at ease with you know, those creative moments. Creativity is some sort of is an intimate thing.
Yeah,
it's
kind of vulnerable.
Very vulnerable, yeah. So I think it's going to be a case by case. That's an important thing, where you want to connect with whoever it is that you're gonna work with, and feel that person, and make sure that you can get dirty in the like and without feeling uncomfortable about that, because it you know, it will go funny. You know, sometimes you have to just like scrap an entire thing, and you got to put some emotion on the side, and you know. But I would agree with Lucas. I mean, a lot of it is so in that context, and the game culture might, in my case, influence a lot. But funnily enough, with Lucas, we did not really have the same game culture, right? So it's still like, I felt in this case, I felt like the capacity for the person to be a good writer, and also to really have that intelligence that was going to be very, very helpful for a game that is important for our company.
Also helpful for you, right? Like, if you know that you don't have to worry about that slipping through the cracks, and that's his job, it makes your job a lot easier.
Yeah, of course. I'll tell you, someone that I never have to repeat more than once something is a huge win.
Yeah.
Any of the companies I've had, I will always give a lot of importance to that skill. You asked earlier, what is a skill that is important for you when you're looking for a writer? And it's good for me. It's true for anything. Right? If we talk about something, I don't want to have to put it in in a corner of my head and then remind that person that thing.
Yeah.
Very important to me that person remember the conversations we had, remember the thing we said we would do, etc. Because you process so many things, like as a creative director, you can't remind people things.
No, I don't envy your position. I can't imagine it's easy. I just don't know how you
take lots of notes.
Get to your game.
Take lots of notes.
Like directors, creative directors, like I just feel like it just seems so stressful. Like it just seems like a lot of meetings and a lot of stress.
Well, I mean, that's the other side. You know, you get the good and the bad. Yeah, for sure.
It's true.
Can I give one more piece of advice? This is really important. No one says this, except Susan O'Connor says this. Please experience art outside of games, and like live life outside of games, because the ideas that come, I feel like some folks who, you know, like the main medium they've consumed their whole life is games. It becomes a sort of like this cycle, this sort of like, you know, regurgitation, and it's
I felt myself doing the thing that I heard. Totally, I felt myself doing the thing that I had heard people make fun of game devs for when Elden Ring came out, where I went to everybody and I was like, this mechanic, and you're like, you can't just walk in and then tell them about other video games. But our director has said that to me explicitly, was like, go watch some movies this weekend.
Seriously,
do that.
Go watch some movies.
Yeah, and then come back.
Go for a walk in nature. Have some hobbies. Like, live life outside of games so that you can bring experiences from the world into the worlds of your games.
I always get my ideas for the next game when I go on vacation, like Costa Rica, whatever. You know, I'm like, there's nothing else. After 4 days, I'm bored to my death, and then I stop.
And Costa Rica is how you came up with Weird West, of course. It makes perfect sense. Thank you both so much for joining me. Do either of you have like Twitter or anything where anyone can find you?
Yeah, we do. What is it? Weird. Sorry.
Wolfeye Games. Wolfeye Games.
It's not your job. Again, the creative director, it's very hard.
No one else takes those notes. Yeah.
And you said it's on Game Pass. I've been playing on Steam. Where else can people check out Weird West?
On PlayStation, Xbox, on Steam, and Epic Games, and very soon Good Old Games as well.
Cool. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us. It's been super fun.
Yes, it is. It's just I get to talk to people about things I like for an hour. It's like cheating. It doesn't feel like a podcast. It's great. Thank you all for watching. See you next time.